So we're going to talk to two people that are running for Senate today. So there's Dan Whitfield, who is the guy from Arkansas, but there's also someone that is a little bit more familiar to Twitch politics, Lady Raincloud, or Sierra Raincloud off of Twitter, who is running for Ohio Senate. So we'll also be interviewing her. I will likely be asking her many of the same questions. I like her as a person, and it'll be so that's who we'll move on to in the case that Dan Whitfield doesn't get back to us like in the next 5 to 10 minutes. I messaged him. I gave him I said if you have any technical issues, just let me know. But yeah, no, Rain is running for Senate in Ohio, and we support Rain, and anything we can do to help along with that will be very, very. Oh, here it is. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? How is it going, my friend? Alrighty. Just a couple of quick things. We are live right now, so we have some people watching. Do you have a web? Oh, you do have a webcam. There you are, right there. The second thing I was going to say is I have. Because I have AT&T, my internet is kind of shoddy, so my internet might dip for 30 seconds at some point, but it'll be back up very shortly thereafter. But now that we're here, we're talking. Hi, how are you? Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey, I'm good. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. I actually ran to the grocery store, and when I get home from the store, of course, I always take a quick shower, put all my clothes in the dryer, taking every precaution we possibly can with COVID. But yeah, so my name is Dan Whitfield, and I'm the Democratic candidate running for United States Senate in Arkansas to unseat and replace John Bozeman.
Alrighty. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us just a little about who you are, what got you into politics, the like.
For sure. So I am just... I'm a working class guy. Let me see if I can get this fixed. There we go. A little bit better. I'm a regular working class Arkansan. I work in IT during the week. Up until I started doing my really heavy campaigning last year, I had worked at Domino's on the weekends for 5 years. So I was working 7 days a week, just trying to pay off student debt, just doing working class things. And I started to look at how the person representing me, who at the time was Senator Tom Cotton, on how he wasn't really representing me or my family. He was more focused on helping his donors and the people who put money in his pockets. And that's when I decided that I had to do something about it. And the best way that I could make a big change and impact for my family and for my neighbors and my community was to run for the U.S. Senate against Tom Cotton. And during that campaign, I ran as a progressive independent, and we built a coalition. We built just a giant team of like-minded people, of people who really want change for their families, who are just tired of the status quo. And I was able to continue what's the word I'm looking for? The momentum from that campaign into this one to unseat Senator John Bozeman. And I'm really lucky, honored, and blessed to have the support of so many wonderful people to continue with me through this journey to hopefully get some real change here in Arkansas, because we need it so bad.
Yeah. So for just for the audience, I talk a lot about how I'm from Texas and stuff. Originally, I'm from Arkansas, and when I saw someone was running for Senate in Arkansas that was a progressive, it was really, really encouraging. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your policies that you support?
Sure. So I am a progressive. The only reason I'm running as a Democrat this year is because my policy platform very closely aligns with the Democratic platform. There are a few things that set us apart, such as Medicare for all, federal decriminalization of cannabis, and nationally expunging cannabis convictions. And I do support the Second Amendment and our right to bear arms, but at the same time, I support it in a way that kind of gets rid of the NRA and needing outside organizations to tell us when and how and why we should own firearms. I think that we should have common sense gun regulations, such as making sure that background checks are performed for basically any person purchasing a firearm. You should have to undergo a background check. We shouldn't have loopholes where if I go to gunlist.com and I see someone listing a firearm and then I want to purchase it, if I go to meet them at Walmart, hand them cash, they hand me the firearm, that's a legal deal. Now,
Right.
the person who sold me the firearm hasn't broken the law in any way. Even if I'm a felon, and I purchased it illegally, I've broken the law. And we have to make sure that we're having background checks. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I would say so too. There's a lot of people that say that running as a progressive in even in a blue state is something that is very difficult to win that seat. What makes you think that you can pull this off in Arkansas?
So Arkansas is now a ruby red state. We're actually the most Republican state in America. We only had 44 or 55.5% of eligible voters show up to vote in last November during that election. And that left us as the state with the highest, the lowest voter turnout. And with 44.5% of eligible voters not showing up to vote, there's a problem. And I think that had helped to contribute to the problem of we only had one Democrat win a state legislative seat this last year. And I think it had to do a lot with not being able to get people energized and excited enough to actually go to the polls and go vote. So I'm really going to focus on the voter bloc that didn't make it to the polls last November. I want to make sure that we go from having 44.5% of eligible voters not showing up to maybe if we could even get down to 30% or even 20%. You just have to get people excited. And I think we can do that with my progressive policies. I think the best way to be a progressive in Arkansas is to be loud about policy. Make sure that we have, of course, we're going to have critics. We're going to have people saying, oh, that's just socialism. How are we going to pay for it? Well, yes, say that all you want. Be loud about it. That way that can amplify my message right off of you. We have to make sure that we're actually educating people on what these progressive policies are, which the biggest pushback I can think of would be Medicare for all. Because a lot of people in Arkansas might be like, well, I don't want Medicare for all because it's socialism. Nothing's free. How are we going to pay for it? Things. And I think it's really funny. I was watching the candidate debates for our last election cycle, and every single Republican in these debates brought up the same key points, the Republican talking points about Medicare for all. You know, it's socialism. How are we going to pay for it? It's going to cost taxpayers $30 trillion. Well, unfortunately, none of the Democrats in our state really supported it at that state level where they were actually making it onto TV for the debates. So they didn't really know how to counter those Republican talking points, where fortunately I'm pretty well versed in it now because I have some amazing supporters who helped educate me on what it really is. And so my biggest weapon against something like that is to educate people. Well, no, Medicare for all is not free. And yes, it will cost taxpayers $30 trillion over 10 years. But what the Republican Party fails to tell you is that our current system will cost taxpayers $34 trillion over 10 years. So honestly, we're actually saving taxpayers $4 trillion over 10 years. They just like to leave that key fact out because it doesn't sound good anymore.
Yeah. Can you just jumping off of that, can you explain why there's so much more cost for our current system than for Medicare for all, for those that don't know?
Yeah, so currently we are actually 37 out of 38 modernized nations on our planet have some form or another of single-payer healthcare. And we are the only modernized nation that does not have a universal system. Now, the reason for this is because the health and pharmaceutical industry actually lobby a lot of money into our politicians' pockets. It's no secret. If you actually go to opensecrets.org and type in a politician's name, you can see how they've been voting. And you can also see where their money's been coming from and where their money's been going. So you can see, for example, John Bozeman took $100,000 from the health and pharmaceutical industry, and now he's going to vote on legislation that's going to help save them money by preventing Medicare for all. And to get a little bit deeper into that, a lot of the problems with our private health insurance is, number one, we can't negotiate, especially prescription drug prices. That's why in America, Imagine this, a facility that is producing insulin, and they're producing insulin and they're producing it for the United States of America and for Canada. This one building is. They're not doing anything different. They're not using some secret recipe or some generic brand. But for some reason, that same vial of insulin in America could be $350 while it's just $50 across the border in Canada. And a lot of this has to do with not being able to negotiate prices. And we are going to be able to do is we're going to be able to negotiate those prices, set price caps, and make sure that we don't have millions of Americans dying because they can't afford their prescription pills while the top three pharmaceutical industries are profiting $1 billion a year. We have to, I consider myself a social capitalist. I do understand capitalism. We have to have capitalism to have incentives so that we can further our economy and society. But at the same time, we can't have crony capitalism where we're allowing corporations just to run unfettered to do whatever it takes to make money, because that's the job of a corporation, is to make shareholders money. It's not to take care of consumers. It's not to make Americans' lives better. It's to make shareholders money. And that's their job. And as long as we allow certain industries like the health industry to focus on making money rather than helping people, we're going to continue to see millions of people without insurance. And, that kind of segues right into number one cause of bankruptcy in America is medical debt. And the biggest problem is this is the majority of the people who file bankruptcy for medical debt. I believe it's 70%. They have medical insurance. They're going to work. Yeah. They're paying their premiums. They're paying their bills, their taxes. They're doing everything right. And then they get sick and they lose everything. They lose their car, their house, financial stresses. They can lose their family. But they did everything right. And that's just a huge problem that we have to make sure is never happening in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world.
Yeah, and you can also look at the pandemic and how many people have lost even their health insurance through their jobs because of this. And I feel like that's one reason that I really try to hammer home having Medicare for all. What is your opinion on a public option if we're not able to get a full-blown Medicare for all system?
So what you're kind of talking is about Medicare for all who want it, basically.
Yeah, kind of like that, yeah.
Had made up, I'll say made up, because Buttigieg made that up during a debate. It actually isn't really a thing. And the reason it's not a thing is because as long as you have Medicare for all who want it, you still have part of the private industry that's going to prevent us from setting price caps and from negotiating prices. So we can have Medicare for all who want it, but the problem with that is it's not going to be the same cost as Medicare for all. It's going to be a much higher cost, because the whole point is having a collective pool go in and having that money pay for it. And when you start taking a lot of the money out of that collective pool, then prices are going to go up. So basically, let me go over real quick just the cost of Medicare. Oh, let me move that phone over here. I apologize. Let me go over the cost of Medicare for all, because it's really important that people know how we're going to pay for it, because it's not free and we are going to pay for it.
Right.
So number one, if you already qualify for Medicaid, if you make less than $29,000 a year, you don't have to worry about paying for Medicare for all. You're going to continue to receive your health care at no cost. Now, this is also going to expand into dental vision as well and hearing. Now, also, if you qualify for Medicaid currently, you are going to be able to get Medicare for all at no cost, and you are no longer going to have to pay those Medicare supplements. Medicare for all is not Medicare. It was a terrible name choice because a lot of people who have Medicare are like, well, this is terrible. I still have to pay this and pay this and pay this. It's not Medicare. It should be called like healthcare for all or something like that. But if you currently have Medicare, then you don't have to worry about paying anything. It's going to be free from now on. Now, that leaves kind of the rest of us in the middle there. So the way we pay for Medicare is it will be 4% of your household income after $29,000 per year. The average household income here in Arkansas is $40,000 per year. So if you take 40,000, subtract 29,000, that leaves you with 11,000, and 4% of that is $440 per year to cover your entire household. So the average Arkansan family will pay $440 a year to cover their household. That is amazing. Now, if you're lower middle class and you make around $100,000 a year, and I want to emphasize that $100,000 a year is really only it's like lower middle class. It's middle class is not, $60,000 a year. That's just the myth.
Yeah.
They want you in conservative states to make your low wages make you feel good. But if you make around $100,000 a year, you take 100,000, subtract 29, that leaves you with 71, and 4% of 71,000 is approximately $238 a month.
It's not bad at all.
That is not bad at all. I mean, to cover your house, my wife and I, we have pretty decent jobs, not the best jobs, but we have decent jobs. And our health insurance for Blue Cross Blue Shield through our employer costs $860 a month. It's insane. And then at the same time, we still have a $1,500 deductible. Plus, we have co-pays and we have to pay for prescriptions and all these other loopholes you have to jump through. We have to pay Blue Cross Blue Shield $11,000 a year before our medical insurance helps us. And that's just an average working class American, what you have to go through. So Medicare for All is extremely important. That's why it's my number one policy on my website, which is danforarkansas.com. Sorry, I just got out of the shower. My hair, I've got COVID hair. I've been wearing hats for like all of my interviews. And someone.
No, I've got COVID hair too. Yeah. So I'm getting some questions, and we'll get to the questions from chat at the end, because there are a couple of things that I was really interested in knowing. So you've already said why you're running, but who is your opponent, and why should they lose their seat?
Sure. So my opponent is Senator John Boozman. He's actually really low key and flies under the radar. He's not very loud spoken. But what makes him really dangerous to Arkansans specifically is he does vote along the lines with, Tom Cotton. He votes along the lines with 98% of the time. Man, I wish I could actually pull up, let me see real quick. I wonder how far back this post was. I went through and I took the time to compare how he has been voting with other politicians. Mm-hmm. And if I go here, I can pull that up. I apologize. But basically, the reason is because he's still voting in ways that hurt the working class. He's not going to vote on things like tax enforcement of billionaires and giant corporations that are currently evading taxes altogether. Mm-hmm. When you look at Donald Trump, how he paid $650 in taxes in a year, most Americans pay that in a month. Yeah. Or not most Americans, but many Americans pay that in a month, or at least they pay that a year and they make far significantly less. We have corporations like Amazon and Netflix that are paying $0 in taxes, when Amazon specifically took out, I believe it was like $400 million in government subsidies. And, John Boozman, he's not going to vote on legislation to put an end to this, to close these tax evasion loopholes. He's not going to vote on legislation that's going to raise the wages of the working class. It's just amazing in America, mm-hmm. We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world, but still, on average, you can't find a single mom who can afford a 2-bedroom apartment working on minimum wage 40 hours a week. You just can't do it. And then people will be like, well, minimum wage is meant for high schoolers or, younger kids, things like that. But that's not really true. When you look at McDonald's statistics, I believe it's something like 40% of McDonald's employees are over 30 years old. So it's just, maybe it was like that 20, 30, 40 years ago, but times have changed. And we have to get that livable wage, and we're not going to see that through a senator like Senator John Boozman. Let's see, he has taken $100,000 from the military industrial complex. And after he took $100,000 from the defense contractors, he actually added an amendment onto the defense bill for this year, the budget, which added like $525 million for a contractor to build missiles. I mean, wow. It's crazy stuff. That's our money that is now going to a missile manufacturer. A lot of people don't know, but Arkansas's number one export is ammunition and war machines and missiles, mm-hmm. and smart missiles. And Tom Cotton, he was all proud of it when we came out with that statistic, but I don't think that should be our number one export. We shouldn't be exporting war. What we should be doing is exporting things that will make our state better. Where I like to push, I'm running for a federal position. I can't do a whole lot at the state level, but I can still push initiatives onto legislators here in our state to help give them ideas on how to make our state better for its constituents. And I think hemp is really the way to go. I'm not talking about cannabis or marijuana. I'm talking about hemp, because Arkansas used to be the number 3 producer of hemp in America back before it was made illegal. And then in 2017 with the new farm bill, they decriminalized it. It's not illegal to grow hemp anymore. So we have all of this extremely rich, fertile land, some of the most fertile land in the country, up in the Mississippi Delta area, where that average county income is around $25,000 a house. Can you imagine a household income at 25 grand with a family of four? That's just insane.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We could be growing hemp in these areas. We could be the number one hemp producer, exporter, and processor in the entire country if we had the right leadership and the right people pushing us in that direction. And what that could do is we could build facilities to turn hemp into, say, CBD oil, into building materials, paper, baskets, clothing, biodiesel fuel. There's all sorts of different things you can do with hemp. And we could have strict requirements. Like you can only build a processing facility, say, in a county that has an average household income of less than $30,000 a month or a year, sorry. And that way we would bring good jobs to these communities where people really need it. But I mean, I can think of a lot of different reasons why I would be better, but I don't want to explain to you why I think I would be better. I think the best thing to do would be to go to danforarkansas.com and look at my policy and just see if you like what I stand for, what I represent. And if you like what I represent, then you have to do your due diligence as a voter to go to opensecrets.org, type in John Bozeman, look at where his money's coming from, look at where it's going, and then go to votesmart.org, type in John Bozeman, and you can see how he's voted on every single bill his entire political career. Yeah. And another thing, I guess, which is kind of relevant to that, is he has actually only sponsored 4 bills in his 16 years in Congress. So, yeah, basically, we pay for, and I think it's about $500,000 a bill is what we've been paying to do.
Yeah. So, going off of that, what are the places that you get your funding from? Where do you get your donations from?
Absolutely. So one of the really cool things about my campaign is I was running as a progressive independent, 100% grassroots. We raised, I think it's like $72,000 something for our last campaign. And that $72,000 was 100% by individual contributions. And wow. 80% of those donations were less than $200. And the other 20% were donations between $200 and $1,000. So it was completely grassroots. I don't owe any favors to special interests. I didn't take money from PACs, political parties, corporations, nothing. And it will be a little bit different this season. I am running as a Democrat, so I'll probably be taking money from PACs. But, I have already pledged I will always work for my constituents. I will never owe anyone favors except for you. Mm. And that's just my duty as a representative. And, that even comes down to my direct democracy platform that I support, where I'll actually be submitting 12 bills per year created by Arkansans. So there'll be a website Arkansans can go on to and submit a legislative idea. And then on that website, people can upvote and downvote ideas. And once a month, the idea that has the most upvotes with my discretion, I'll actually draft it into a bill and I will submit it. That way, it's actually giving Arkansans a real legitimate voice in the legislative process.
Wow, that's actually really amazing. I had never thought of that before. We're getting so many questions from chat. I'm going to try and run down all these questions that I have. What do you think? I'll ask this as a 2-part question. As a nation, what is the biggest issue that we face today? And then we can also apply that same question to Arkansas. So as a nation, what is our biggest problem? And for Arkansas, what is the largest issue?
Absolutely. So I think where we really need to start looking if we're going to start progressing and moving forward as a nation is we have to look at the foundations. And the biggest aspect of our foundation as a nation is going to be education. We have to focus on education. If we start educating people properly, then we don't have to worry about things like acts of sedition or insurgents, because a lot of those people would be educated enough to know that what they're doing is wrong. But anyways, education is extremely important. A lot of people don't know that, like our schools, especially here in Arkansas, they only get about 10% of their funding from federal funding. So I think it's extremely important we reallocate some of the wasteful spending that we are spending as a government in programs like the military industrial complex or subsidies to billion-dollar corporations and reallocate some of that money to go back to our schooling. what I would really like to see done, which again, at the federal level, I wouldn't have a lot of control over our state, but we have a very unique problem here in Arkansas where we have some of the highest rated and wellest funded schools in America. And at the same time, we have some of the lowest rated and the poorest schools in America. So I think what we really need to do when 90% of a school's funding comes from community taxes, I would like to see our state start pooling those taxes together as a state and equally distributing by students and staff. That way we can make sure that our rural citizens, our rural constituents, their children are receiving the same quality of education as in the areas such as Northwest Arkansas or Central Arkansas. Because when you have lower income communities, then the teaching staff, their salaries are significantly lower. We still have teachers making like $56,000 a year trying to pay off student loans. And when you have such low wages in communities like that, it's hard to find good teachers because a lot of good teachers will move out of those communities to further their own lives and better their own lives and make more money and things like that. So I think education is extremely important. That's got to be our number one. A good close number two is I would love to see the end of American imperialism. We are just in war after war after war after war, and we are in all these wars because Eisenhower warned us the military-industrial complex was taking over. Well, they did. They spent billions of dollars to make sure our legislators work for them. That way they get hundreds of billions of dollars in return. And a lot of these defense contracting companies are actually owned by ex-legislators themselves or by retired generals. We have to end American imperialism by stopping invading foreign countries just to steal their natural resources. There's so many different things, but when we stop attacking the world and stealing from, there's no such thing as a poor nation. There are poor people that are being exploited. And we have to make sure that we stop exploiting poor people that take their wealth away from them. When we stop drone bombing civilians and things like that, you'll see terrorism go down. You'll see the hate for America start to subside and go away altogether. We need to focus here at home, have good jobs for ourselves, with the federal jobs guarantee, with the Green New Deal. There's all sorts of different ways of rebuilding our infrastructure that we can start to change our focus from outside foreign wars to building ourselves from within, because we could just be so much better. I just feel like we don't have the right leadership to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's education, ending, the military-industrial complex, and of course, a very close third, second, first, whatever. I guess no order for all of these. We have to start to combat climate change and take it seriously. We need to make sure that we're preparing for climate refugees, for climate disasters. We just saw in the last year, we had these just crazy rainstorms up in Michigan, which actually ended up breaking 3 dams and they had to evacuate communities. We're going to continue to see a lot of heavy rains where areas are not used to that rain, and that's going to displace, natural waterways. We're going to have to, there's just so many climate catastrophes, especially here in Arkansas with giant tornadoes all the time. We have been seeing more and more large tornadoes, one after the next. And then you look at Australia and the wildfires that killed 1 billion animals and basically took away all the natural habitat for koala bears. It's just the Arctic ice circle losing polar bears. There's so much going on. I think there's a great series called Our Planet on Netflix, and it really helps you to understand how humans are affecting our environment and our basically it's just our ecology. We're just really screwing up, and we've got to stop.
Yeah,
And
no,
there's
I agree so much. I'm really surprised. One of my questions here is related to what my surprise is about, but for running in the reddest state in the country, like we were saying earlier, I'm surprised that you're so open about a lot of these positions. Do you think that hurts your chances at all in Arkansas?
Absolutely. Yeah, but you know what? I'm an open book. I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not. It does hurt me sometimes, but at the same time, I hope that it shows my integrity. If I go to I ran as an independent in my last campaign. So if I went to a Republican meeting or group and they asked me about abortion, I'd be like, I am pro-life, but I'm still pro-choice. I think that women should have a choice over their bodies because it's their body. Even though I know it would hurt my votes and I know they don't want to hear it. and it brings objections and things like that. When I'm at a Democratic Party or House Party with Democrats and they ask me about gun control, will I ban assault weapons? No, I'm probably not going to ban assault weapons because I believe in the Second Amendment. Of course, it may hurt votes, but that's just who I am. I don't want to just tell someone something because they want to hear it just to try to earn a vote, because that's not earning a vote. I think that's more stealing a vote is what that would be. So it may kind of hurt my chances, but I hope my honesty will help at the same time turn more votes towards me than having no integrity would take away.
Right. So one question related to the top issues that you were listing earlier, in terms of American imperialism. This one popped up right as you were saying that. Do you support expanding the USAID, the foreign aid budget, and the U.S. meeting its foreign aid commitments?
So I do agree with meeting foreign aid commitments. I know a lot of conservatives will be like, well, why are we giving money away when we should be focusing it on here? But at the same time, money that we have a fiat currency, number one, so we'll never go bankrupt. We'll never run out of money. We have to understand that first. If you don't know what modern money theory is, please Google search modern money theory, check out Professor Randall Wray, and educate yourself a little bit on economics, because the way that the government balances their books isn't the same way that you and I do. It's a little bit different the way they budget. So what's really important to understand is America is the number one arms dealer in the world. That's what we sell. We sell weapons. We sell tanks. We sell weapons of mass destruction, ammunition, guns. That's what we do. And I think that we should stop. We shouldn't be the number one exporter in arms. What we should be is the number one exporter in doctors, in food, in medical supplies, things like that. And if we can start focusing on foreign aid, I know, of course, there are a lot of governments where if we give them, say, $1 million to buy vaccinations for whatever, or $10 million or however much, we have to worry that a corrupt government is just going to stick it in their pockets. Like Marcos in the Philippines. He was the previous president in the Philippines who ended up pocketing a lot of people's money. But my point is if we send aid in the form of food and supplies and doctors, and not necessarily as in currency or cash, then we don't have to worry so much about ourselves being exploited. Now, I do think we need to really trim the fat on our military budget. I'm not saying just go in and cut the budget down, whatever, our budget's like higher than the next 10 nations combined. What I'm saying is the first thing we need to do is go in and audit. My wife's an auditor, so I kind of think in different ways sometimes, but we need to audit the military budget, see where the waste is actually being spent, and then trim that fat and move that fat away from the military budget into social programs like education, healthcare, and things like that. Now, I had a veteran follow me home one day because I have a big sign on the back of my car, Dan Whitfield. And he wanted to explain to me when he was serving in Afghanistan how he worked on a convoy and they would drive around and they would move supplies. Well, he told me about how one time they got 3 truckloads of these really nice fleece vests, like really nice vests in July. So they hauled these fleece vests around for about 3 months until they burned them, because they had to end up replacing it to haul with something else. But the point I'm making is a defense contractor made a freaking ton of our tax dollars selling these fleece vests that we didn't need in the first place, just so they could be hauled around and destroyed at a later time. We need to trim fat like that. And if we can, $20,000 toilet seats.
Yeah.
Buy at Home Depot for $5, and the military is charging, or contractors are charging our military like $2,000 a bolt. So, things like that. Audit it, trim the fat, and then we'll be heading in the right direction.
There's this huge parking lot of tanks in the military saying, we don't need any more tanks, but they just keep giving them more tanks in there.
Oh, man.
So let me see. Where are we here?
And while you look at that, actually, I pulled up on my Facebook when someone had asked on why I should replace Senator John Boozman and try to take his seat. Well, I wanted to point a couple of people that he's voted along the lines with. So we all know who Mitch McConnell was. So from 2018 to 2020, my opponent, Senator John Boozman, voted 99% of the time along with Mitch McConnell. He voted 99% of the time along with Senator Tom Cotton, 98% of the time with Lindsey Graham, 98% of the time with Chuck Grassley, Kelly Loeffler, who just lost her seat, who is,
Hmm.
insider trader. Her husband's the owner of Wall Street. He voted along the lines with her 97% of the time. Marco Rubio, 97%. Mitt Romney, 95%. Senator Ted Cruz, who basically just incited an insurrection, who committed sedition against our country, violating the 14th Amendment, Article 3, he voted along the lines 95% of the time. And the same with Josh Hawley, 95% of the time. So you may not know necessarily who Senator John Bozeman is because he's really under the radar. I think he's named a couple post offices. That's some good stuff he's done for Arkansas.
Yeah.
Thank you. But he's just as dangerous legislatively as any of these other GOP thugs who are more worried about taking money from donors and not helping us.
Yeah. So let's see. I think the next one I'd like to ask is, what do you think about campaign finance reform?
Oh, I'd love it. It's such a great question. It's actually part of my policy is campaign finance reform, ending Citizens United, making sure that we don't have basically super PACs that can funnel dark money into candidates' pockets with unlimited quantities. It's crazy. A lot of people don't know some of these statistics, such as 86% of the time, a candidate with more money wins an election. 86% of the time, doesn't matter who you are, what you say, if you got more money, you're going to win the election. And then at the same time, we have to understand that Congress, their approval rating was like 14%. So it's like, why is the approval rating 14%, but these guys keep getting elected over and over and over again? It's because they have more money. We have to have it so that I think publicly funded elections is a great idea. That way, candidates have equal amounts of money to spend. And most of the money, honestly, as a candidate, I know where it goes. Most of it goes to advertising. So maybe we could even have a federal advertising branch that handles campaigns. That way we can save a lot of money by doing it through a federal program where you don't have to worry about paying private citizens. I know media companies are going to hate that. There's some little things we can do. Professor Randall Ray, who I mentioned a little bit ago, he had a really cool idea where how about we take away the individual contribution caps. So anyone can donate as much money as they want to a candidate, but half of the money donated goes to the candidate's opponent. So if you want to donate $10,000, your candidate will get $5,000 and the other candidate will get $5,000. That way it really keeps the money even so we don't have to worry about a financial advantage. Again, as a candidate, I see during election season, do you drive around at all? Did you see any billboards up with candidates on, like faces on the billboards?
I saw a couple around here in Houston, yeah.
So those billboards, if it's on a highway, like a busy road, they can cost about $5,000 a month. And when you do it, you have to sign a contract for like 3 to 6 months. So if a candidate has like 10 of those billboards around and they're paying $5,000 a billboard, that's $50,000 a month that they're able to pay to put their face up there, because a lot of winning an election is name and face recognition. If you look at a name and you see a face, you're more likely to vote for that person. Well, unless you really understand what's going on and dislike them.
Yeah.
So we really have to even the playing field so that the wealthy people who have been running this country for so long, the oligarch, they don't have as much control. And I think that's going to really help bring back a democracy towards our democratic republic. I guess kind of segueing off that, I can get into other ways that we can help with campaign finance reform and help with having a more democratic process, such as ranked choice voting. If we start to do ranked choice voting, then that'll really help alleviate some of these campaign finance problems as well, because it's really easy if there's one Republican and one Democrat to bribe the one candidate, and give them a whole bunch of money, and then it's just a 50-50. But when you have multiple candidates, it's a lot harder for them to focus all the money on one person without having to spread it around. Man, let me see.
I'm really, really impressed with the every single answer that you've given is all the things that I try to get across to the people I talk to in my audience. For a lot of people in the younger generations that I generally have in my audience and that are in my friend groups, I'm only 25. A lot of people are very, very disaffected and don't really care much for voting. And something that I've noticed in a lot of content creators and streamers that talk about politics is that we are trying to get people more invested in politics. What
Mhm.
is what is something that you would say to people that are kind of disaffected and not really excited about politics? And what would you say to them to get them excited and get them out to vote?
That's a really hard question because
Mm,
historically, lower people just don't vote. And I completely understand. I mean, I didn't even really become politically aware until I was like 26, 27. Until I was older than you is when
mhm.
I really started to see, there's something going on and something's not right. So it's really hard how you connect with that group of people. Um, I don't want to say fortunately, but I don't have the right word for this, but we have a lot of younger people right now who understand how important politics is because of especially the high costs of college, student debt, low wages, stuck in poverty, gentrification. There's all these different problems that so many Generation X, Generation Z, and millennials that people are starting to really think about and try to figure out how they can solve these problems because they're in the middle of it. They understand. So the way that I personally really want to try to get a hold of younger voters is, of course, the federal decriminalization of cannabis, because so many people smoke pot when they're younger, and then maybe they get caught with, like a gram or a seed or a stem or something in their car, and now you got a felony following you for the rest of your life. So there are a lot of younger adults who have literally had the system just, I hate to say, take a crap on them, and now they're screwed. What can you do? Well, you got to find representatives who are going to help get those convictions taken off of you for making a mistake as a kid, because there are people my age who still have those same mistakes that are following them around to today. And then, of course, I do support lowering college tuition. I think that we should have free 2-year tuitions and free trade school tuitions. And if you get decent grades and I guess exert yourself through your associates, you should be able to continue to your bachelor's at no cost to you, because we have to focus on education. Um, I do support eliminating student debt, which is really huge too. So I think I'm really going to try to get a hold of the younger generation. I'm a gamer. So there are a couple times where I think I've done 2 gaming live streams. I didn't have a lot of people viewing.
Hmm.
So I stopped doing it. And then one person kind of criticized me for it. But, I grew up with video games
Yeah.
and movies. My mom worked 3 jobs. I had a single mom. That's just who I am and my generation. Um, and I think it's really just getting people to find out who I am. I think that's really what's going to get people excited. That's why I do my own weekly live streams every Saturday, so that I can answer questions like this, get some face-to-face time with people, which is super hard to do during this pandemic. But as long as people start to see, hey, there are regular people out there running, and they might actually fight for me once they get in there. So how do we get them to vote? You just got to
Yeah.
focus on policies that's going to help them.
Yeah, no, and my chat is very, very excited that we have a gamer running for office. There's a common meme about gamers being the most oppressed peoples, so we do need representation in office. Um, wow, you've answered so many questions that people have asked, so I don't even have to ask them, such as like the ranked choice voting. Um, Here's a what policies would you suggest for either ending the drug war or negating the effects of the drug war?
Well, of course, legalizing drugs does make it a lot easier to push the cartels out and to take away their financial incentive to keeping the black market open, making it so that um, a lot of these drugs are decriminalized so that they're not just being used as an excuse to people locked up in private prisons. It's just really hard with cartels because drug cartels are always going to be there. And I mean, all we can really do, I don't believe in the DEA at all. Maybe if we had the DEA focus on drug cartels specifically and not necessarily on legal businesses and just American citizens who might be at home growing some weed themselves, smoking some weed, but not actually selling it or hurting anybody around them, get the DEA to do what they're supposed to do.
Hmm.
But it's just really tough. How do you get rid of cartels? I know Oregon just legalized, I think it's like everything for the
Yeah,
most
they
part.
decriminalized or legalized it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do have some models that are basically we can use them as testing to look at in the future to see how the statistics affected those communities. And I would say in the next 2 to 3 years, we should have a pretty good idea and look at how the decriminalization of drugs in Oregon went to see if it did lower crime rates, lower drug cartel presence, and things like that. But you just have to look at these models. And unfortunately, we don't have enough of these models yet, but we're starting to get them. So as soon as the data comes in, we'll be able to look at that data and make some really good decisions.
Yeah, and something that I always try to get across, because I have conversations with people from very, very far right to moderate conservatives, liberals, socialists. There are even some communists on the internet, and I talk with all of these people. Some of the things I try to hit on is like we have to look at what happens in other countries and see what works and what doesn't work, right? And we can take the best of their countries and bring them here to make our country even better, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Is kind of the way I look at it. So the next question I have is, what is your position on potential statehood for DC and Puerto Rico?
So I believe DC has already actually voted internally on a state ballot, or not a state ballot, on a district ballot for statehood. And they actually voted in majority for statehood. So honestly, at that point, I think if the residents in that state want statehood, then that is their American right to have representation for taxation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as Puerto Rico goes, I don't think they've actually voted on it. But again, Puerto Ricans pay taxes. They pay American taxes. They aren't allowed to participate in a lot of our voting, but they still pay taxes. So they're also suffering from taxation without representation. We all saw with the Boston Tea Harbor what that ends up as. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that these areas and districts should be able to vote on whether or not they want statehood. And if they vote for it, then absolutely it should be granted. We shouldn't have some bureaucrats in Congress saying, oh, no, we can't do that because then there's going to be two more Democrats than Republicans because that's a liberal state. It doesn't matter. Who cares about that? That's just a power play. What's important are the actual people and constituents there, not two people sitting on the Senate.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got about 10 more minutes. I want to ask two more questions. So what is your stance on LGBT plus issues and on Native issues, so Native American issues?
Well, I mean, I'm 100% pro LGBTQ rights. We definitely have to make sure that everybody has the same rights. It doesn't matter what a person's sexual orientation or identification is. We have to make sure, especially here in Arkansas, we have a big problem with same-sex couples adopting children and things like that. Where I was a cable guy for 5 years. I've been in thousands of people's houses. And I was a really good cable guy and a really bad cable guy at the same time because I was a contractor and I got paid per job, but I was really terrible at my job because I could go and fix the problem very quickly, but I like to talk. So I could sit there for like 30 minutes or an hour just talking to people.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when someone invites you into their house, they become this vulnerable person who's actually willing to tell you about themselves. And I've met so many wonderful people and I've met some terrible people. And I'll tell you this from my experience going in thousands of different people's homes in 5 different states, that it doesn't matter whether you're a same-sex couple or a heterosexual couple. It doesn't matter. You can have great couples that are same-sex, great couples that are hetero. You can have terrible, parents that are same-sex and terrible parents that are hetero. It doesn't matter the sexual orientation. What matters is what kind of person the person is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I totally 100% that, or I think that we do. I was really happy and relieved when President Joe Biden just removed the trans ban from the military. That was just absolutely ridiculous. And then as far as Native rights, I mean, a lot of people don't even know what Standing Rock is or what happened in Standing Rock. A lot of people don't realize that Manifest Destiny was responsible for 97% of Indigenous Americans suffering from a massive genocide, just so that the white men from Europe can come over here and take over all of the land. And then what do? We throw them basically in a giant concentration camp in Oklahoma and take all of the other land. And now we're treating them like trash, like what happened in the Dakotas with the the pipeline.
Mhm.
And we have to make sure that if anyone deserves reparations or the utmost care from us in gratitude would be Native Americans. We have to make sure that we are taking care of these people who didn't give us their land, but who had their land stolen from them so that we could be here.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that the last thing that I want to touch on, and I really liked this question that came from chat very, very early on. What is the one position that you refuse to budge on?
The one position I refuse to budge on would be Medicare for all. I think
Hmm.
it's just so important. It's the number one cause of bankruptcy. Millions of Americans die because they can't afford their prescription pills. Again, as a cable guy, I've been into houses where there have been older customers, and I remember this old lady, and she's sitting at her table, and she cuts a pill, and I'm just thinking, oh man, she's like some kind of drug addict or something going on. And then she cuts it again, and she puts it in a little pill bottle in 4 different days. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I can't afford my prescription this month. That's why I'm paying for the cable. And I know some people would be like, well, if she can afford cable, she can afford her prescriptions, but they don't understand. Some of these older people, they don't have someone to talk to. They don't have family. They don't
Right.
have friends.
Yeah.
That's all they have. And we shouldn't have people rationing drugs. And again, we can go over even into insulin, where we have type 1 diabetic families who are paying $1,000, $2,000 a month just to stay alive. And Medicare for All is going to alleviate so much pain. It's going to make sure that people who get sick don't lose everything just because they got sick. You should never go bankrupt when you get sick, especially if you're doing everything right and paying your bills and you're a contributing member to our society.
Yeah. Um, well, Mr. Dan, I am, and me and my chat are both more than impressed with the answers that you gave. We were, usually when we talk about electoralism, I try and talk about a lot of very pragmatic things and baiting our expectations. But it seems like you're really willing to just put yourself out there and speak your mind. So I want to say thank you for coming through today. We're definitely going to be keeping up with your campaign, and we would love to have you back on to give you more of a platform later on when we get closer to voting dates and stuff.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me on and asking so many great questions. I honestly, I almost felt like you were just on my policy page going down. It was perfect.
Yeah,
um, and yeah, I'd love to come back anytime. And I'm so sorry that I got so busy on Tuesday.
don't worry
That
about it.
usually doesn't happen.
Yeah, no worries. I know that if you're elected to the Senate for Arkansas, my family that lives there, most of my family are going to be in good hands. I have family that live in Fayetteville, down all the way down to Camden and Magnolia down in South Arkansas. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I'll definitely be spreading your name and telling everyone to donate. I have some people that have donated from my chat just now. So,
Oh, thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. Thank
I
you so much
appreciate
for
it.
coming on.
Oh,
All right,
thank you. Y'all have a good day. And danforarkansas.com is my website.
all right. You have a good one, man.
You too. Thank you.
That guy is really, really cool. I am actually appalled at how based that guy is. Oh my god, what a Chad. Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna link his here. I'm gonna copy and paste his website into y'all's into the chat. Oh, hello. There we go. Boom. Please, please, please go visit that website, save it, donate to his campaign. If a person like that is elected in a state as red as Arkansas, I think that it is we're looking at a very bright future. I'm again, I just can't believe how impressed I am with his answers.